Alright, in this video, we are going to learn the quick selection tool inside Photoshop. So let's get started. Alright guys, welcome back. I hope you are doing great as usual. Just a quick reminder, in the previous episodes, we learned the rectangular marquee tool, the elliptical marquee tool, the single row and single column marquee tool. Then we also look at all the lasso tools. And if you have been following the channel for a while, you know that here on the toolbar, if we select any tool, it will have different settings relating to that particular tool on the options bar. Now, in previous episodes, I explained that the rectangular marquee tool and the lasso tools all have 4 buttons here at the top. Okay guys, if you look closely, we have this button, this one, and this one. These are all drawing modes. You can draw in the normal mode by clicking on this button, and after establishing a given selection, you can click on this button to add to the existing selection, or you can click on this button to subtract from a given selection, and you can click on this button to intersect the selection. So there are 4 buttons in total, but there is one selection tool in Photoshop which has just 3 buttons, and that is the quick selection tool. So I'm going to go to this button with the object selection tool, and you notice we have this little arrow beside it. This means that you can click and hold for a moment to reveal the other tools that are stuck beneath the tool. So you can see that they share the same shortcut W. So the way you use the shortcut is, if you have maybe the object selection tool currently active and you need to go maybe to the quick selection tool, you can hold the shift key and press W. It will cycle to the quick selection tool. If I need to go to the magic wand tool, I can press shift key again and then press W. Just like so. Now, since we have the quick selection tool active, let us go to the options bar to see a few settings. Of course, these buttons here are the drawing modes, which I'm going to explain in a moment. But the first 2 important settings I want you to understand are sample all layers and enhance edge. The first button here means if you turned it on and have many layers on a given document, and let us say you intend to make a selection on that particular document, Photoshop is going to look at all the layers, not just the selected layer, if you have this button checked. Then the other button here, enhance edge, means if you were to create a given selection here, Photoshop is going to automatically enhance and make the edges smoother. So I always recommend you leave these 2 settings on unless you have a specific reason why you don't want to. Notice on the screen that we have the universal no icon, and that is simply because we need to tell this tool that we are working on a given layer. So I'm going to select maybe the background layer, and you can see if we return to the canvas, the universal no icon has disappeared and we now have a brush. So with sample all layers check, I don't necessarily need to click on the background image to select it. I can still select the curves adjustment layer and everything will work just fine because we have this check mark turned on. So the quick selection tool helps you to create quick selections, as the name may say, inside Photoshop. Okay guys, this tool is the tool you are going to use most of the time to get started with any given selection inside Photoshop. Whether you are selecting a person or a complicated hair, you start with this tool and then you can then refine the selection later on. So notice here we currently have the curves layer selected, and because I have this button checked, my intention is to select these rocks and simply change the background. So I'm just going to click somewhere around here and drag. Notice that as I drag, Photoshop automatically creates a selection for me. So I'm going to click on the brush size here and increase the size of the brush to like 100 pixels and hit the enter key. Now I can click here and just drag around to create a selection. When I'm done with my selection, I simply release the mouse. Now you can see that although we have enhanced check turned on, Photoshop did not do a great job of actually detecting these edges. So what I'm going to do is to reduce the size of my brush, and I am going to switch to the third mode here, which means subtracting from the selection. Now if we look on the brush, we have a cross inside of it, which means we are going to paint on this given selection to subtract from it. So I'm just going to click here to subtract from that selection like so. Even on this portion, I'm just going to click there and allow Photoshop to do its thing. Now for these portions right here, you notice I have a very big brush. So I'm going to reduce the size further and then carefully zoom into that portion, and with the third mode here selected, I can click inside to let Photoshop refine that selection. And it did a very great job here guys. So even here I'm going to just try to refine that edge like so. Okay. And then while using the brush tool, you can press the space bar to pan around the document while you are working. Okay guys, very helpful. Now instead of always coming to the options bar to change the modes you are drawing in, you can always hold the Alt key to access the subtract from selection mode, or the shift key to add to a given selection. So I need to add to this selection right here. So I'm going to hold the shift key, and you see we have a plus sign inside my brush. So I'm just going to click on this edge a bit, just to add to that selection like so. To fit everything to screen, I'm going to press Ctrl 0, that is Command 0 if you are using the Mac. Now everything looks nice, and if I need to add a mask to this image, I can just come down here at the bottom, making sure the background image itself is selected, and then just click on this camera icon. I'm going to just add a new solid color layer and change it maybe to this color, and then take it down. Now we have a nice selection on the screen, guys. Now I'm going to switch to this other document, and let us say we intend to create a quick selection around this couch. So currently you can see we have the minus sign inside our brush. What I'm going to do is to quickly go to the options bar and pick the new selection mode. Now I'm just going to click somewhere like here and just drag around the image, then allow Photoshop to do its thing. Okay, now we need to add this support right here. For that, I'm going to zoom into this portion and I'll reduce the size of my brush. Now if you look on my brush, you notice we have a plus sign on it. That means if I were to click here, I'm just going to add to that existing selection. But as I do, Photoshop ended up subtracting these portions right here. So I will now hold the Alt key, reduce the size of my brush, and still making sure I have the Alt key pressed. I'm going to subtract these portions just like so. Nice. What I'm going to simply do is to hold the space bar and pan around to the other section. Now I'm just going to paint on this other leg to select it just like so. Now with this selection established, what you can also do is to go to select, go to modify, and then you see we have different settings here. We can choose to expand the given selection or contract it. So let us say I need to expand it a bit. I'll just click on the word expand, and what I'm going to do now is to take the expand by value up to 2, because currently as I record this video, Photoshop does not support decimal value, so you can enter like 1.5 inside this dialog box. So I'm going to enter a value of 2 and then just say okay. Now you see the selection has been expanded. If you need to contract the selection, you go again to select, modify, and then this time you choose contract. Let us contract now by 1 and say okay. Now let us say we intend to smoothen the selection a little bit, so we can go to select, go to modify, and then we'll choose feather. I'm going to reduce the feather value up to 1.3 just so slightly and say okay to have smooth edges around the selection. Now with this selection currently active, the next thing you might do is to save the selection so that you can come back to it at any given time in the future. To save a given selection in Photoshop, with your quick selection tool still active, you can just right click on it, and then you see we have save selection from here. Or you can still go to select and we see save selection. Any one you choose, just make sure it is selected. Now when this dialog box opens up, we need to give a name of this given selection. So I'm just going to say selection 1, and under the operation I want to make sure it is set to new channel and say okay. Now if I press Ctrl D to deselect everything, I can easily load this selection back by simply going to select, and then this time save selection will become grey out because we don't have a given selection, and since we saved a selection earlier on, we will now see load selection. So I'm going to click here, and if you have many selections you have saved, you can click on this pull down menu to choose. Since we have just one selection, we have just this one here. So I will just select it and then say okay. Now we have the selection restored, and what I might do is to change the color of the couch. So I can go here and add maybe hue saturation. By default it comes in as a max, which is actually nice, and then I'll just hit colorize. I'll just drag the slider up so slightly like so, and there we go. We successfully adjusted the couch a bit. I think this looks great, guys. That's nice. So I'm going to switch to the last document right here, and you can see there are a lot of cool things we can do with these pillows right here. First, you can use the quick selection tool and making sure this layer is selected, and then if you have the plus sign on the screen when you have the quick selection tool active, just know that you have the caps lock turned on. In my case, I'm going to turn it off. Then I'm going to increase the size of my brush to like 50 pixels, hit enter, and maybe you can select the pillows by just dragging around it like so. Okay guys, and if Photoshop ended up dragging too much, of course you know what to do by now. We can reduce the size of our brush and then hold the Alt key and carefully tell Photoshop that look, don't paint these portions. Now as we learned earlier on, you can just add a little bit of refinement to this selection by right clicking and then choosing feather, and I'll just say okay to add some softness around the edges. Now if I add maybe hue saturation, I can recolor this pillow individually. So this is the before, this is the after, thanks to the quick selection tool, guys. Very awesome. I like doing this type of things. Now let us switch to the first document we started this demonstration with, and I am going to revert all the changes I did by going to File and then choosing Revert, because there's something very important I need to show you. Now, in the previous example, we took some time to trace over all these rocks. Another alternative to that is to make sure you have your quick selection tool active, and then maybe I can increase the size of my brush. And then since I noticed that the background here is very uniform, I can just click on the background and drag around just like so. And you see guys, we didn't have to take the time to paint individually, adjusting things here and there. Because the background is uniform, we can start by selecting the background, and then if there are some refinements to be made, like inside here, if I zoom in, you can see we have this portion which has been left out right here. So I'm going to reduce the size of my brush and then just paint inside here to select that portion. Nice. Now we started this selection by selecting the background, and that is not what I actually wanted. I wanted to select the rocks. If I were to go here at the bottom and click on this button, you'll see the rocks disappear because we selected the background. So I'm going to press Ctrl Z or Command Z if you're using the Mac. What I have to do is to right click simply and then choose Select Inverse. Notice currently that we have these matching ants around the border of the whole canvas. The moment I select Inverse, those matching ants disappear from the border and we now have the rocks selected. So again, I can simply come here, click here once, and we have successfully removed that color. So as you can see guys, there are many things which you can accomplish by starting with the quick selection tool. It is going to give you a lot of room while just starting out and trying to cut images from background, because after all, you can lay down the foundation of your selection with the quick selection tool, and then maybe you enter into select and mask, which we are going to see in future videos. Or you can even combine the quick selection tool together with the lasso tool, the rectangular marquee tool, and even the pen tool. Okay guys, so in future videos, these are all the topics I'm going to be covering, so kindly subscribe to a channel like this to stay up to date. On my side, I found it very helpful to show these tips and tricks on using the quick selection tool to you. I hope you found value out of it. So kindly subscribe and stay tuned, and I will see you in the next one tomorrow. Bye bye.